you could spend all day on the phone cold calling clients. Your ROI won't be near as high from that as the money you spend on it. If you have your system set up right, you need to view it more as an investment. I probably should have understood more about before investing. It would have given me a lot more peace of mind. I would have slept better at night. Definitely saved me 4 hours a day easily. I would say that's the biggest thing. The monthly cash flow with rent owns is substantially higher. Instead of a couple $100s per door, maybe if you've owned the property for a while, we're seeing, significantly more than that, like 3, 4, 5 times that. Nobody wants to just invest in a company, no matter how flashy the logo is or how on point the colors are. That doesn't really matter at the end of the day. People want it. If I could go back, I wouldn't bother building a website for the investor side of my business. I would just... The highest ROI on time that I have consistently got is I spend a lot of time while I'm getting paid is really the highest ROI that I think anyone who's just starting out especially can achieve.
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. Today, we're joined by Mitch Pedersen, an investor, an entrepreneur who's tapped into multiple investment strategies, including wholesaling, private lending, and his very own rent-to-own business. Now, Mitch has rapidly built his portfolio, and today we're diving into some systems, some strategies that allow his business to scale efficiently. Mitch, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Alray. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, Mitch, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and, how this real estate journey started for you?
Yeah, definitely. So, could make it a really long story, but I'll shorten it a little bit. Basically, growing up, I always wanted to start my own business. I had some pretty big influences in my life early on that were business owners. My grandfather was probably the main one. It just was something that I never had the right opportunity, or I never found the right opportunity to take advantage of it and really build out that business, right? To take action. A friend of mine that I grew up with took some training, got into real estate, started his own rent-to-own company. And he was really the inspiration for me to get into rent-to-own and get into real estate, honestly. He showed me a whole bunch of different opportunities that he was working on, and I found it just fascinating. And that was really my first exposure to real estate investing, using strategic skills and a plan instead of just buying and holding rental properties. And so that really interested me. So from there, got some training, signed up with a great company that gave me some really, really good skills and tools and knowledge that I needed to take action. And then I started taking action and bought some properties.
I love the way you sort of summarize that into like just key steps for anyone listening that's like very far in the beginning of the journey, is like, built up some interest around it and then decided to go educate yourself on it and then just jumped into taking action. I think that's sort of the crucial key steps to getting started. Now, you've had experience with various strategies to date. If we break it down, let's start with your private lending deals. Like, looking back at your experiences, what factors are you looking for to make a deal feel safe to you as a lender, and what are some potential red flags for people listening that are thinking, maybe I want to be a little bit more on the private lending side, maybe a little less active as an investor? Based on your experiences, what are some things that you look at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you're just starting out, you need to understand the strategy that the investor is using that you're looking to invest with. So, my first deal, I was very, very green, and I did a second position mortgage on a flip property. And, there were stressful moments throughout the whole thing. At times, like most real estate transactions tend to have those ups and downs throughout them. But the learning experience from doing that deal was phenomenal. I mean, it all turned out pretty smooth in the end, and I learned a lot. But in hindsight, I probably should have understood more about the process of flipping a home before investing in that one. Would have given me a lot more peace of mind. I would have slept better at night. So I would say that's the biggest thing. Know what you're investing in, not just the property, not even just the person, but the strategy that they're using and what the exit strategies are for when things go wrong.
I love that. I love that. And you kind of just touched on it. There's multiple factors to it. It's the property, the person, and the strategy, right? And I feel like you need to be comfortable with all three and have some decent insight on all of that. Now, I love something that you mentioned there. It was like you had all of these learning experiences, all these learning curves and potential hiccups like most real estate transactions do, but that didn't scare you out of real estate and you're like, nope, you know what, this is too stressful for me. I'll just move on to something else. Maybe I'll just, do some trading here or do something there. Like you stuck through it. So, I mean, one of the other strategies that I personally know you like really, really successful at is the rent to own. Now, what made you choose rent to own over, let's say, traditional rentals? What was the biggest factor that sort of appealed to you?
Yeah, that's that's a really good question. So, I would say rent to own is because it's what my friend did that got me into all of this. It was something I was familiar with as a more, I would say, a more advanced or more creative strategy compared to just long term holds. So I felt more comfortable with it right from the beginning. But there's a whole bunch of things with it that make it really unique from other real estate investing strategies that I really like. I would say probably the biggest one, the one that's kind of tied for most important. Obviously, it has to be a real estate deal where the numbers make sense. That has to come first. But as a very, very close second, rent to own allows me to really help people achieve their goal of home ownership. And that's something it's important to me that it's not just about the numbers. Like I said, they have to work or we wouldn't be doing it. But being able
Yeah.
to help people achieve something big in their life, a big milestone, is a nice feeling. I really like it, and it's something that my JV partners can really get on board with and get excited about as well.
Yeah, yeah. I've said it before when discussing rent to own, and I'll say it again. It's one of those win-win-win strategies for all parties involved. Now, for people out there listening who don't completely understand the rent to own process, or maybe they've heard some things, and obviously there's a lot of misconception around rent to own as well. Could you further explain sort of the concept on maybe someone asking themselves, why would someone, a tenant buyer choose a rent to own program over, potentially just waiting to qualify for a traditional mortgage?
Yeah, definitely. So everybody structures their rent to own programs a little different. So I'll just be speaking to mine. And I should say, technically, we offer a lease option program, which is a specific type of rent to own. So what we do is we help qualify the clients first. So we find out how much home they'll be able to qualify for at the end of a certain amount of time. So I offer either a 2 or a 3 year program, depending on my client's needs. So we would qualify them over that period of time. And then we go out and purchase a home for them that they like. They get to help pick, and that's the right fit for them and their needs and their budget, obviously. So, the advantage to that over just renting a place and saving up that down payment or trying to repair your credit yourself without any help, which we offer, really is that you lock in the purchase price. That would be the biggest one,
Yeah.
especially in this market right now. We do
Oh, yes.
charge a yearly appreciation rate through our program. That's one of the ways we make money as an investor. But it's a lot less than what the market typically appreciates in the last few years anyway. And this really gives a lot of value for our clients at the end. They end up purchasing a house with a bunch of built-in equity, having us help them repair their credit, and they build up a substantial down payment. So it really sets them up for success. And it gives them a very clear plan to get that goal of theirs, right? To get that house.
That's one thing I wanted to highlight because we've worked on multiple transactions together, and that's a key benefit, and maybe not even a tangible benefit that people see and can really see or take note of, is you kind of have someone in your corner, you have a team in your corner as the tenant buyer of advisors and educators to sort of get you to the level where you can qualify for home ownership versus I'm going to rent and I'm going to save up and I'm going to buy in the next 2-3 years. And those 2-3 years just keep on renewing and renewing and renewing. And you look back and you still rent it and you're still not in a position where you can qualify and buy. So you kind of have advocates in your corner trying to get you to that position where you can actually purchase and be a homeowner. So one question people may have is, okay, well, that's all good and well. We could educate the tenant buyer, try and get them across the finish line. But what happens if the tenant buyer fails to secure financing at the end of the agreement? What options do they have?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question as well. So, multiple ways to look at that. So, I'll explain it from the tenant buyer's perspective first. For them qualifying and purchasing the home that they've lived in, they've invested their time and their emotional energy into that place. They've made it their home. For them, we would look at if it makes sense for their situation and for the market, just extending the program to help them get qualified,
Yes.
help them build more down payment over that extension. And I mean, if something was wrong with their credit that still hadn't been fixed, help them fix it, obviously. Um, that would be probably the best outcome, honestly, for them and for us. Now, from our perspective as investors, we also look at, exit strategies basically, because if they're not going to qualify, whether that's through choices of theirs or just, sometimes bad things happen in life, like job losses or, something like that, then we always have backup plans in place for how we can exit that investment, whether it's selling it, turning it into a long-term rental, if it's in the right location and the rules allow, putting it on Airbnb, and then that would get us through till the end of that term that we had been planning on investing in it. If it's 3 years or whatever, then we can make a decision at that point again if we're going to sell it or not. What we're seeing in the market right now with how prices are appreciating so much, we would even be able to return a good portion of our tenant buyers option consideration or option deposit that they paid into the program in that situation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on that. Now, I love the fact that you highlighted both sides, the tenant buyer's perspective, the investor's perspective, because ultimately, you are sort of facilitating entire this entire deal, so you deal with the investor side of it and you're dealing with the tenant buyer side. And I'm sure you probably come across some common things that maybe most tenant buyers don't fully understand about rent to own, and maybe most investors, or common things that investors might not understand about rent to own that you're having to clarify. Could you highlight, one or two things on either end of the spectrum that you find is sort of a common reoccurring thing that comes up?
Yeah. I would say on the tenant buyer side, a lot of times they think that we're providing financing like a bank. So they think that
Hmm.
they own the place, they're on title, things like that. So it takes a little bit of explaining to explain to them that no, this is a lease option. So you're a renter first, you're leasing from us first, while having the option to purchase the home at a preset price with some terms and conditions that are met during that process. But also they're not obligated to purchase if they get to the end and for whatever reason that house is no longer the right purchase or the right house for them to purchase. They can walk away. It's not like an agreement for sale or something where they're locked in. Now they are slightly locked in financially, but if conditions change enough that it doesn't make sense to go through with that option to purchase, they can change, right? And we can even help them with that. If it's the house that itself, let's say they didn't plan on starting a family, and then throughout the rent to own program they have a couple kids and they need a bigger house, we can actually facilitate moving that program to a bigger house for them as well. So that's the beauty and the flexibility of rent to own. So that would be something I explain a lot to tenant buyers. On the investor side, I work with such, good, well-educated JV partners. I can't really think of anything I've really had to explain to them other than just, the basic investment structure and stuff. So yeah, I can't think of much there.
Yeah, but that is true though. Your joint venture partners are sort of educated on the strategy itself, so there's not much teaching that you typically have going on there. No, I love that answer. Thank you. So, for a tenant buyer who will actually follow through on purchasing, what do you look for in a tenant buyer who would follow through for purchasing? What's like a red flag that would just instantly just disqualify a tenant buyer from a rent to own deal?
Right, definitely. So when we're going through the qualification process, we look at quite a broad range of things. I mean, on the financial side, they need to have a credit score that's repairable.
Mm.
Now, to simplify that down, when I'm talking to tenant buyers who really don't watch their credit that closely or anything, basically to get their credit score up to a point high enough to qualify by the end of the program, they really need to start with a score of 500 or more, and they really can't have a foreclosure in their history. Other than that, though, even if they've had a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, we can typically work with them. It's pretty hard to mess up your credit files so bad that you can't qualify for a mortgage ever again. So we can work with a lot. They would need income that is sufficient to cover the payments, debt servicing ratio, all that kind of stuff. And they do need a bit of an initial deposit that's kind of like a down payment, typically 4% of the purchase price of the home. So really, if they check those three boxes, basically the income, the initial deposit, and a repairable credit score, then the answer is usually yes. It will depend, on the more specific criteria, details of their credit report, income amount, are going to determine how much of the house they can qualify for. But the short answer is usually I can work with them.
I feel like our listeners out there would be really disappointed if I didn't cover some of the things that you have really done really, really well. The marketing, advertising side of things, as well as like the system side of things. Like, I mean, when we first spoke, this was at the beginning of your journey, and to see the amount of progress that you've made and how you've been able to scale up so successfully, there's definitely things behind the scenes that you're doing right now. I'm not saying you need to give your entire ingredients list of that secret sauce away, but like, what are just some things, if you were to look back on your journey right now, what are some things that you can pinpoint and be like, yes, that was time well spent on this, that was time well spent on that. That was maybe something I should have focused on earlier, and I probably would have seen better results. Are there some things that sort of stand out to you from that regard?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to get into a more advanced creative strategy like rent own, um, get the training. Go find a coach or a mentor who can teach you all of the ins and outs of it, because it's a complicated strategy. And if you could go through it as a tenant buyer first and then go do it on your own, you might be able to do it by yourself, but most people are not going to do that. So the next best option is to get the training and coaching you need to understand it. But after that, I would say, really focus on creating systems that help you achieve repeatable outcomes. So whether that's having your lead gen or marketing, kind of on a system that's almost on autopilot, that's a really good way to keep those leads coming in so that you can keep closing deals. I would, if I could go back, I wouldn't spend as much time building out business brands as I would my personal brand, because
Mm-hmm.
strategy like this, connecting with potential JV partners, investors, is a huge part of it. And
Yeah.
building a personal brand is how you connect with them. Nobody wants to just invest in a company, no matter how flashy the the logo is or how on point the colors are. That doesn't really matter at the end of the day. People want to invest with people. So, if I could go back,
Yeah.
I wouldn't bother building a website for the investor side of my business. I would just go to more meetups and connect with more people. And then, I would say, just as something I'm looking to do going forward that I think is going to change things a lot, is just continuing to leverage AI. I don't think it's there yet for dealing directly with the clients. I know, some people have had better luck with it than I have, actually, but using AI on the back end is just a game changer.
Oh, 100%. There was so much there to unpack based on what you said. I I think it's a common thing with entrepreneurs and investors getting started in whatever the venture is. There's this unspoken checklist of, I need to get all of these things done before I can start the business, before I can start focusing on the fundamental things that drive the business forward. So I need to get the website up and running. I need to get business cards. I need to get all of those things before I can actually start working like on income generating activities in the business. And I fully agree with you that one of the highest ROI activities is working on your personal brand, because yes, people aren't investing in a fancy logo. They're investing in you as the person, right? They're not investing in the company, because the company is you. Until you've built a brand that's recognizable by many, it's you, the brand. So no, I love that. I think it's something that most of us at the beginning of our journey get stuck in before we realize, like, okay, I need to move beyond this now. Having the perfect website is not going to make a world of difference if I'm not getting any any leads coming in, if I'm not building the business, getting money coming in and moving things forward. I also like the fact that, and I think you kind of touched on this, is working on activities that are going to continue to pay forward. So it's breaking down what you do fundamentally and seeing where you can put the time in to sort of replicate and duplicate those activities down the road. And I think tying that in with AI is going to become so much more powerful. Like, we already seeing it, but we like this is just the beginning. You know what I mean? So being able to tie that in with AI would, if you understand the business on a like fundamental level, and you know the steps, and you really grasp that, you can take that and put little engines in place that can just push things across the finish line with a lot less manpower.
Exactly. I can't remember if it was on a podcast or a book that I read. I really wish I could remember, because I would let all your listeners know, but it was kind of a mindset kind of idea about investing your time instead of spending it. The same way what we should be doing with our money, right? You can go around, you can have a great job and spend all your money on things that better your life, or you can invest your money in things that will pay you back in the future. And it's really no different with our time and with systems. You could spend all day on the phone cold calling clients. Your ROI won't be near as high from that as setting up a system that collects their email addresses and phone numbers and sends them valuable information that lets them know about the service that you're providing.
I love that. And it's so true. And especially if you think of it from a scaling factor, is there's only so much output you can do with just man hours. So having those systems in place allows you to scale a lot higher. I'm always thinking, like, how can I automate, and then how can I delegate? Like, automation just being the first part of it without losing quality of whatever that action is. How do I automate what I can, delegate what I can, and then sort of take it from there, right? I think it's automate, delegate, and delete, because there's things we need to just delete so we can focus on like those core activities. But
I struggle with the delete part, but 100%, that's that's the way to do it.
I know. I think we all do. Is like there's 100 things we can be doing in the business, but unfortunately we can't do them all. So you need to kind of take a step back and look to see, like, what are the activities that are going to give me the highest return on investment of my time. And I love the fact that you mentioned that there's a difference between spending your time and investing your time. So, just looking back on the entire journey, I mean, okay, so you've highlighted the education being a crucial factor, and that education came with a bunch of mentorship and support and community as well, which are just propelling forces that just push you further down the line of, like, increasing your probability of actually having success, right? Because you have that support. Now, that aside, you could have all the support in the world, but you could be spending your time on just the wrong activities and not see the results. What are some key things? Because I know you doing this all the while, still having your job, but you've scaled this far. So you have the same time as everyone else, right? You must be using your time on some of the highest producing activities. If you were to reflect on that and sort of try and pinpoint, like, I know this has served me well, spending my time on that has served me well, what would you say that is?
I think probably the highest ROI on time that I have consistently got is with my job. I spend a lot of time driving. So listening to podcasts like yours, audiobooks, and some of the training through the programs that I've taken while I'm getting paid to drive is really the highest ROI that I think anyone who's just starting out especially can achieve. I mean, once you've been doing this for a while, I mean, ideally, most people don't want to be at their job anymore then. So I think that doubling up gets a little harder after that. But anytime that you can accomplish two things at once, really, is the best use of your time, and always increasing your knowledge and skills off the start is, there's always room to improve that and level up further.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's sort of a common trait amongst any successful investor, any successful entrepreneur, is that they're always looking to level up. And, from a book or a podcast, just like one single nugget from that can have such such a massive impact. But the key thing is, of course, taking that and using that, and not just moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. I think Alex Hormozy calls it um, mental masturbation, if I'm not mistaken. It's like just
Yeah,
taking in a bunch of information and just feeling accomplished from just taking all this information in, but like having zero action behind all of this that you're taking in. You don't get any different results, right? So
that's right.
no, I love that though. One thing I'd say you've done well is being able to build both pipelines, because from what I've seen on the rent to own, it's you can't just focus on, and I mean it's a common trait amongst different strategies, but you can't just focus on just the tenant buyers. You know, it's the tenant buyers, and you planting seeds there, and you watering those seeds, and you waiting for those for those to sort of come to fruition. But on the back end of things, there's also the partnerships, you know, the joint
Mhm.
venture partners, the brand that you're building, so that you can, you know, attract more joint venture partners and build trust and all of that. How have you found that balance, that chicken and the egg, like, you know, pushing
Yeah.
joint venture partners down the pipeline, pushing potential tenant buyers down the pipeline? Because you could have the joint venture partners and then, oh, well, I don't have any tenant buyers, and they can't wait long enough. Their money's burning a hole in their pocket, and they move on to the next investment opportunity. And, you know, the same can be said for having the tenant buyer, potentially getting the property under contract, and running around like a headless chicken trying to find a joint venture partner before you need to remove conditions.
It's definitely it's an ongoing. I mean, I used to view it as an ongoing challenge. Now I view it as ongoing opportunities back and forth. You're 100% right though. There's lots of weeks where I have, you know, tenant buyers that are getting ready to go. They're going to, you know, we're going to put an offer on a house for them right away, and I don't have a JV partner lined up. And then 2 weeks later or a month later, it'll be the exact opposite. I'll have JV
Yeah.
partners who are emailing me or booking Zoom calls, and I'm like, Kate, please just wait 6 weeks. I'll find you a tenant buyer, right? And it just constantly goes back and forth. And you know, I guess I used to get stressed about it a little bit because it does, you know, it's some pressure, especially when you already have a house under contract and you have people who are, you know, ready to move in and they're relying on you. But now I view it more as an opportunity, right? It's with how busy I am, networking, connect people can be a bit of a challenge. And when I have a deal ready to go, it gives me a lot of motivation and pressure to get out there and connect with those investors. So yeah, I actually really enjoy it now that I'm more used to it.
I love that though. So my understanding on it all is you've built a pretty decent funnel for your tenant buyers so that it's somewhat consistent. And then on the back end is you are doing some consistent activities to ensure that you're fostering those relationships with joint venture partners. And when you have something and you need to act on it, I have a tenant buyer. They committed, you know, linked up with the realtor. We found the property's under contract. Now you just go into hyperdrive. Like, okay, now I'm spending an imbalanced portion of my time just focusing on trying to line up that joint venture partner. That's kind of how it goes, right?
Exactly. What I find is with joint venture partners, it's really easy to have a lot of soft commitments from joint venture
Yeah.
partners, but until you have a property and an accepted offer on that property that they can take to their bank and actually get qualified, you don't actually have a joint venture partner yet. Right? And that part can be challenging. You know, sometimes the first joint venture partner that I give that accepted offer to for them to take to their bank, they'll come back with an approval with a, you know, within a couple days, and we're good to go and everything is just smooth. And then the next time I'll give it to them and their bank will say, you know, well, you got to pay off your line of credit first, or, you know, something like that. And you know, it's just how it goes. Banks have rules that change, people's financial situations and lives change, so you can't plan for all those different things. You can't really pre-qualify people enough, and so that's just how it goes, and that's the challenge and the excitement. That's what keeps it exciting, I guess.
Yeah. 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 No, 100%. And I mean, I think for new investors getting into it, it can be sort of nerve wracking. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, like, how do I make this work? But honestly, when you grow in, like, as you grow, you grow in the size of your problems, the size of your challenges. You're just figuring out ways to overcome these challenges. So no, yeah, I know we've worked through our fair share. Now, have you ever had to sort of either like remove a tenant from a rent to own agreement, or what sort of, and full disclosure, you're not a lawyer or anything along those lines, but what sort of like the legal financial process when that happens? What does that look like?
I would say it really depends on the situation. I have had two instances of this actually already. The first one, I can't probably shouldn't go into too much
Too much, yeah.
detail, but um, short answer is the program wasn't going to work for him anymore and he needed to exit the program, and he was very willing to exit the program. It wasn't me evicting him. He needed to leave.
Yes.
So that one went really, really smoothly. It puts us in a kind of an unfortunate position where we have to take one of our exit strategies then, but that is how it goes. Not everything can go according to plan, no matter how much screening and prep work we do. Now, the beauty of how we structure our rent-own deals and the properties that we purchase is that investment might actually end up being our best investment in the portfolio so far, because it has appreciated like crazy. And now, we can either start a new rent to own with it, or we can sell it on the market and actually sell it for more than, after only 1 year, than we would have sold it to the tenant buyer for in 3. So, it's still a great win as an investment, just not a real winning rent to own. Now the other situation that I've gone through recently is a little bit more complicated. It's, when a couple splits and neither of them want to live in the house anymore, then it starts to get more complicated. But you go through the legal process, you work with your lawyer, you have a strong power team that can help you, and you make sure that you had all of the risk mitigation put in place from the beginning to be able to work through those problems. And I mean, yeah, I can't get much more specific than that, but that's what we do.
No, I get that. So for people out there thinking, okay, so what sort of potential, what things can I do to try and mitigate some of the risk? And on the other end of things, what are some exit strategies for when things don't work out? Should I be looking to see that I'd be able to sell for more and not sort of be at a loss there? Should I be able to see if it would cover as a rental? Like when you look into exit, is it like, let's see if we can get a tenant buyer in X amount of period. If it doesn't seem like we're able to, let's see if we can rent, or let's see if we can sell. What does that exit strategy look like? What are you looking at when you're in acquisition mode, trying to find a property that would work for the tenant buyer, but also mitigate that risk on your end if the tenant buyer doesn't close? What are some things people can do to kind of just mitigate that risk so they're not left in a position where it really actually ends up being a bad deal when all is said and done?
Yeah, exactly. I think the biggest thing is to just plan, right? Have your exit strategies lined up and make sure that they're the right fit. Like if you're doing it the way I am with a joint venture partner and myself being the managing partner, make sure those exit strategies align with your JV partner's goals, right? So, typically what we try to do anyway is, if for some reason the rent-own deal doesn't work out in the first year, then we would look for a new tenant buyer, possibly just rent the property out as a long-term rental, or maybe put it on Airbnb if the location is right and the rules haven't changed. And that's to get us through that first year so that we don't run into extra taxation due to it being bought and sold within a year and stuff like that, right? Now, if it's closer to the end of the program, I think just selling it is the exit strategy that we would use on really any of the rent-owns that I have, especially with how well the market has done for the last few years. There's enough appreciation there that we can sell it and still do really well on it. But I think that's all getting more into the technical things that we would actually do. The biggest, most important thing is right from the very beginning, just plan for the worst case scenario and put risk mitigation things in place to mitigate any of that risk, right? Buy under market, buy properties that are good rentals, right? Because if you need to rent it out for the long term, you don't want to be trying to rent out a $800,000 home with a swimming pool. You want to be able to,
Exactly.
rent it out and still cash flow, even if you're going to, maybe not account for vacancy in that cash flow number or something. At least cash flow while it's rented. You don't want to be losing money every month. And then also, we try to only buy properties that are completely turnkey. There's two reasons for that. One, I don't really want the tenant buyer doing a bunch of work to the property that they might cut corners on and won't be done to our standards, and it might hurt the resale, right? And number two would be we don't want to buy a property, have the tenant buyer say that they're going to do a bunch of stuff and then not follow through and leave, and then we have to do a flip essentially, right? So
Yeah.
those are, a couple things that I've chosen not to do. It doesn't mean that those, doing a flip to own, as I've kind of coined it, it actually could be a really good strategy in the right situation, but there's other things you'd have to put in place to mitigate the risk of it. So simple, I think, is always better. And we
Yeah.
like to just buy turnkey properties.
No, I get that. Now, for every business, I think it's kind of crucial to figure out your ideal clientele. So like when it comes to marketing, you're speaking directly to that audience, Yes, it's not all inclusive, but it might scare other customers away that aren't your ideal audience, but it would better attract your ideal audience. Now, I'm not sure if you've dug any deeper into this, but like what are some like disqualifying factors? Are there like specific property types outside of any of your luxury properties? Are there any specific property types where you're like, hey, we just won't touch this, so this is sort of what we're aiming for? Are there any specific types of tenant buyers that you might steer clear of, or types of I don't know, let's say call it tenant buyer profile that you might steer clear of, that's maybe not necessarily a bad tenant buyer, but maybe not your ideal tenant buyer, so this is who you focus on? I know that's a very loaded question, but just sort of on your end, have you figured out, like, after doing this multiple times, like narrowing down, like, okay, maybe we don't want that next time, maybe we don't want to deal with that property type next time, maybe we don't want to deal with that type of tenant buyer next time, this is sort of our ideal client and our ideal process, and this is what we ideally want to be working with? Has that happened yet? Have you started refining that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I would say instead of talking about, clients who might not be a good fit, I've kind of gone the other way and focused more on what is the ideal fit or avatar. I forget who came up with that term for it,
Avatar.
but
Yeah.
avatar is a great term for it. So
100%.
really the ideal client that I prefer to work with right now is a couple, preferably with a couple kids, because they're very much at the right point in their lives to be serious about home ownership. So, single people might want to buy a home to secure their future investment and stuff, and that's great. But they're more prone to just saying, you know what? No, I want to move to Calgary tomorrow, or something like that, right? Whereas a family is going to put down roots. The kids will be in
Yeah.
activities or school or whatever, and they'll be more settled into their community and more serious about home ownership. It's preferable from a financial perspective and a risk mitigation perspective if they both work, if they have dual income. But if they don't, it's not a no either. It just complicates it a little. I personally also really like working with small business owners. There is slightly more risk in some ways with that, but I find it really rewarding to help people who are kind of on the same path that I'm on, honestly, achieve their goal of home ownership. So we put some things in place to help mitigate that risk. Like they need a little bit more initial deposit. And maybe they only do 3-year programs instead of 2. That way they have more time to show that income from their business. But yeah, those are kind of my two favorite avatars.
I love that. Yeah, I probably should have worded it more in that manner. That way, we don't have any people listening feel like, hey, I'm this avatar, so you wouldn't. So yeah, no, I get that. And it makes sense, right? You have a couple, yeah, they want to put their roots down. A single person could just decide to move tomorrow. Unfortunately, there's no way to know if couples are going to have longevity or not. It's just one of those things that happen. But yeah, I agree. It's a good tenant buyer profile. Now, if we were to look at the property type itself, like, are you comfortable with them going for, on the smaller side, apartments or townhouses? Or is it like, I'm looking for just half duplexes, detached single families, and maybe property types that are not too, or properties that are not too expensive, so that it could still work as a rental? Is that about it?
Yeah, that really, yeah, you pretty much you summarized it really well there. We try to avoid properties that have condo fees or homeowner association fees, at least that are excessive and monthly. Like a lot of properties are kind of seeming to go
Yeah.
that way. So we typically avoid those. There are situations where we can still make them work, but yeah, it's it definitely eats into the rental cash flow side of it. And typically, what we find is if there's a $400 or $500 a month condo fee, even though it's usually at a cheaper purchase price, we could probably just get them into a nicer home and have a similar payment for them and a similar cash flow on our end. So I prefer that to paying condo fees. Um, and then yeah, we typically don't do real like luxury homes. This is a starter home kind of program. Um,
Yeah.
so that works better. Acreages, again, like it's not a complete no. In the right situation, we might consider doing an acreage, but they would need more initial deposits, and they would have to qualify really well for that, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a ton of sense. Now, for the active investors who are watching this and just trying to get as much little nuggets as they can, maybe they're thinking about getting into the rent-to-own space, and they're thinking to themselves, well, you know, what's the process for handling late or missed payments on an RTO agreement? Is it different from your traditional rentals? What does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. So from a legal perspective, they are leasing the property first and they have the option to purchase it as a secondary agreement. So if they're late on their rent payments, we would handle it the same way as really, or we could handle it the same way as any tenant who's late. Now, because it's a rent own, we would look at their situation very carefully, probably more carefully than we would if it was just a renter, to find out why
Yeah.
they're late. And if it's, just a matter of their paycheck didn't clear in time or something, we're going to be a bit more lenient. Definitely get them to sign an agreement saying, when they'll get caught up, put them on a payment plan or something if necessary, and monitor it very carefully because the bank will be looking at those late payments when they go to qualify at the end. So on-time payments are even more important actually in some ways. But at the same time, we're not going to terminate the program, just because they're late on their rent once. Now, when it comes to the payments on the option agreement side, that is extremely crucial that they're on time, because the bank will be looking at that very carefully as well to show that they have financial responsibility and can make their payments on time. They use it to help qualify them. So we really encourage them just not to be late. And if they are, if they get severely behind, then we would have to, potentially terminate the program if there's no way for them to catch up and they have zero intent of catching up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I was going to ask, do you have contingency plans for tenant buyers who, fall behind financially, but they still want to continue with the program? What would that look like if they still have every intention to, but, maybe they've had some unexpected snags
Right.
along the way? What sort of plans you put in place there?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it would be very situationally dependent, but absolute kind of, I would say, worst case scenario, that we can make a good scenario is if, let's say they temporarily lost their job, or if it's, a couple and one of them was sick and couldn't work, we could pause the option side, so the rent to own, and turn it into just a rental for a few months until they get caught up. And then we could actually just restart the option agreement, start it fresh with clean payment history, and make it a shorter term because they have already paid that money, right? So they could use that
Yeah,
as their new initial deposit, probably have higher monthly payments because we'd have to keep it to the same term, but start over so they have the clean payment history.
100%. Now, for investors out there who they're fairly familiar with the standard long-term rental, and they can see somewhat of the appeal to the rent-to-own side of things. What would you say are some pros and cons on the rent-to-own as opposed to the long-term rental? Now, I know there's some differences, like with the long-term rental. It's easier to get tenants into a property than it is getting a tenant buyer, ensuring that they qualify, finding them the property. It's a lot more upfront labor intensive, but there are pros to that when you get the tenant buyer in and you don't have to manage the repairs and the maintenance and all of that of the property, right? Aside from that obvious one, are there any other things that you found where you're like, you know what, I really love rent to own, and this is why I'm sort of going all in and I'm scaling up on this?
Right. Well, I mean, I would say the biggest difference between the two from a financial perspective is the cash flow. The monthly cash flow with rent owns is
Yeah,
substantially higher. Instead of a couple $100 per door, maybe 300 or 400 if you've owned the property for a while. We're seeing, significantly more than that, like 3, 4, 5 times that. Now the downside to that is, you could argue that rent own really isn't a wealth building strategy because we don't own the property long enough for it to really appreciate to the point where you could, remortgage it, pull equity out, and buy another property or something like that. Because, ideally it's going to be sold in 2 to 3 years. So it's
Yeah.
a midterm strategy, that you've got your short-term strategies like flipping, or you could argue wholesaling, even though you never actually own the property. And rent own is kind of in the middle between that and long-term rentals.
I love that. I love that. Now, when it comes to rent-own marketing, I know we've touched on this. Marketing your rent-own business. How did you initially find your first tenant buyers, and how are you finding tenant buyers now?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, there's so many sources, right? Working with my power team, my realtors, my mortgage brokers, those are usually really high quality leads because
Yeah.
the potential client is already warmed up to the idea. But if it's coming from well, either a broker or a realtor, typically, they've tried to get qualified. If it's with a realtor, maybe they've even gone and looked at houses already, and then they don't qualify for what they wanted or at all last minute. And that's when we can come in and really, help out that client, but also whoever brought the lead as well, help them close the deal too. So that's kind of a big benefit of those leads. But a lot of
Yeah.
my lead gen is from paid ads, Kijiji ads, that kind of thing. Rent Faster has a rent to own option you can check if you have a property that you're listing. I do tenant buyer first, so I typically don't have properties I'm putting up, but it's something we can use with as an exit strategy, or working with other investors who may have a property that they want us to do a rent to own on for them. Right. So if they have a flip that they finished and they're not able to sell it for, the price they want, or they're not in a hurry to sell it because they want some cash flow out of it, we can come in and do a rent to own on that property, find a tenant buyer, and really make it all come together for them.
I think when it comes to the, getting tenant buyers, or trying to build up all these different lead generating strategies, speaking to power team members is a lot easier than forking out money, for ads. You know what I mean? It costs nothing but your time. I mean, it depends on the person you're speaking to. Some people might not want to be having these conversations, but other people might be like, you know what? I have no idea how to run ads and what this marketing game looks like, and I'm just going to be putting money into ads on a weekly, monthly basis. I'm not even knowing if I'm going to close any of these things. Did you feel any of this when you got started? Do you have any marketing, advertising background? How did you build up that skill?
Yeah, no, I don't have any background in that at all. I'm as about as blue collar as it gets, honestly. So hadn't run an ad on Google or Meta at all before getting into this. I mean, honestly, it's something you can learn so easy through all of the tools on the internet now, whether it's, starting out by watching a few YouTube videos and then, maybe paying for a course if that's the way you want to go. I didn't actually. I pretty much did it all myself, and I paid for it in creating ads that weren't that good. So that's how I learned the hard way, I guess. But it's, again, actually, it kind of goes back to our something we talked about a bit earlier. The money you spend on ads, if you have your system set up right, isn't actually, you need to view it more as an investment, not as spending, because once you
Hmm.
put them into your system, if they click on your ad, they obviously had some sort of interest in it. Once they're in your system, you just need to keep nurturing them and showing them what service you're providing, what value your value you can provide to them. And then, eventually they might convert to a customer, or they might refer someone else to you. So it's more of an investment than a spend.
I love that. Absolutely, 100%. And it's all in the systems that you have, the follow-ups and all of that. Now tell me, how do you sort of on just a high level on your system, when they funnel through, how are you funneling them through? Are you sort of segmenting leads to focus your efforts on those that are more likely to follow through? Just on a high level, what does that funnel look like?
Well, I probably have more development to do on this. So if anybody who's listening is a real marketing expert, by all means reach out. I could probably use some guidance and help. But what I do right now is all of my marketing really funnels them toward filling out the application that I have on my website,
Mm,
because that really gives me the information I need to know if they're a lead that is going to qualify really at all ever, if they're going to qualify in the next year or two, or if they're ready right now. And then once we go through that part, I can sort them into the different segments. And then once they're in those segments, I have a lot of it automated so that they get constant, not constant, because that sounds like it's like daily, but they get reminder emails and texts occasionally, just encouraging them to, keep moving forward with getting qualified and booking a call with me and reaching out basically. If they qualify right away, I'll call those leads directly and start a conversation with them in person, because that in person connection is much more valuable than 100 emails. But for the
for sure.
ones that are further out, because I have limited time to invest in them, they get more of an email drip campaign and texts and stuff.
I know, a while back when we had spoken, when you were getting started with this, you were sort of just tweaking all of your different things. And I'd speak to you one week and you'd be like, I'm getting a bunch of tenant buyers who think that these are rental properties, and then maybe I'm not getting enough, because now maybe I've dialed it in too much and it's too strict. And it's just a constant, you're just constantly just tweaking things until something clicks, right? And then you just want to ensure that all of these leads aren't going to waste, that you're actually nurturing them, that you're following up, and that you're sort of just driving them across the finish line. Now, one thing I like doing is I don't like just hyping up a specific strategy or hyping up something and only showing one side of the coin. So I have to ask you, what would be your least favorite thing about the rent-own strategy?
I would say it's a lot bigger initial investment to close each deal than probably almost any other strategy, honestly. If you look at, well, long-term rentals is an easy one to pick on, but if you look at long-term rentals, you're literally just looking for and screening a pile of properties till you find the right one, then you negotiate on it and do all your due diligence and stuff, and then that's it. We're doing all of that, but before we can get to that point, we have to find the right client. We have to find the right renter essentially to move in there, which takes a lot of work. So that's at least double the work. Yeah, so that's probably my least favorite part, is the big upfront commitment, but it pays off in the long run, so that's why it's worth doing it.
I love that. Yeah. And again, you don't have to really manage the upkeep side, the tenant buyers handling all of that
Exactly.
once they're in. So it's worth just all that upfront effort, and then for it to be a lot easier when you compare it to just your long-term rental. Now, here's something that I think a lot of investors, entrepreneurs struggle with. This is, shiny coin syndrome, right? Like, you look over there and it looks tempting to sort of divert your attention, right? But at some point you sort of need to concentrate your attention so that you can build something, giving it enough attention, enough focus so that you can actually nourish and build and scale something, versus trying to split your attention into multiple directions. So what would you say, what's your process for evaluating whether a new strategy is worth integrating into your business, or if it's just a distraction?
Ah, that's a great question too. Okay, so really why I'm getting into wholesaling, and I'm just kind of ramping that business up over the next few months here actually, is because it fits into my systems really well. So I don't have to invest all that time and some money that I did into building my rent to own systems, because I can just basically copy and paste them over. Obviously, I've got to change all the content and
Yes.
branding, but the system is still the same basic system. And so that makes wholesale a really good fit for me. And also because it gives me an opportunity to get out there, look at new properties, connect with more people who might be a great wholesale lead, but also, if they're having to sell their house, they actually might make a good tenant buyer for my rent to own program. So, using strategies that can really feed off of each other, I think is probably the
Hmm.
best way to diversify and grow.
Yes.
However, that being said, the other thing that maybe I have shiny object syndrome a little bit, but the other thing I'm looking at is getting into more wealth building type strategies like multifamily. So in the next year, I plan on moving ahead with that. I've got been looking at a few larger multifamily buildings, and I think that would be, kind of the next step in my evolution as an investor is getting those long term investments, the ones that hold for the rest of your life for 15, 20 years at least, and and that pays for maybe my daughter's university or something like that someday.
Oh, 100%. I completely agree with everything you said there. And the thing is, oftentimes when you see this, this shiny object syndrome and you're tempted to switch, if you switch into something and potentially starting at step one, whereas you maybe on step 5, 6, or 7 with whatever it is you're currently doing, instead of growing that out, you're switching and you're starting from the beginning with this new opportunity. And Alex Omozi, puts that business life cycle or entrepreneurial life cycle. He puts it in. He explains it so well. But essentially, that's what a lot of people do. So yes, that's one of the things I look at as well. Is if I'm going to divert my attention, is it something that's parallel or adjacent to what I'm doing now, where they could feed off of each other, where they could complement each other, where it's a skill set or something that I can already bring, so that I'm not starting at step one. Now, to your point on like moving to the multifamily, well, the thing is, you didn't just say, hey, I'm going to get into rent to own, maybe I'll do a deal, and then, oh, okay, maybe rent to own's not for me, then I'll do this, and maybe that's not for me, and I'll do that. You've sort of scaled your rent to own business. You found a parallel way to start something that's going to complement this business, where you don't start at step one. And then you're thinking long-term wealth building, because the wealth is in holding the real estate. And when you try to scale to a certain point, like multifamily is just one of those vehicles that are a little bit easier to scale up with. Not that it's impossible on the single family side. I've seen, veteran investors do that, but it's more common than not to do it on the multifamily side. So I think it's a solid plan though. Like, I know you kind of, as much as you might think, I think we all have to a degree the shiny object syndrome, but I think you have it well laid out. So I just wanted to see you sort of articulate it, because I think it's a question that most of us have to ask ourselves when we see, hey, this person's doing that, they seem to be doing really well. Am I missing out on an opportunity by not pursuing that specific vehicle, that specific strategy, right?
Exactly. Another major consideration why I'm looking at getting into multifamily sooner than later as well is actually a bunch of my JV partners are looking to get into multifamily, and they've asked if that's something they could do with me. So that's real encouragement to pursue that as well. I mean, if I have the partners, at least some of them lined up already, then why not, right? Learn
Yes.
the strategy, learn the process, and take action. That's the key to achieving my goals.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if you have clients, customers, in this case, investors, which are the lifeline of your business as well, that are asking you for something, and there's a demand and you can fulfill that demand, then I think it just makes sense for you to provide that, right? Unless it's not worth the ROI of your time, which of course in this case it absolutely can be, if you learn the skill set and you put it into practice. So no, I fully agree with that. All right. So, just while we start wrapping things up here, just look, we've covered, I want to say your journey to date though. Just looking back on it all, what's one habit, one system that you wish you would have implemented sooner, that might have changed things? Was that just the education side? Would you have just said, hey, get started learning sooner? Or was there anything else that stands out?
Yeah, I think if you go super big picture, I wish I had started investing and got the education and stuff, 10, 15, maybe, well, not quite 20. I'm not quite that old, but maybe almost 20 years ago, right? But going more recent, I guess, I would say investing in those, like how we kind of started the conversation, investing in those systems that allow you to repeat the results. Um, like a really good CRM and communication system for communicating with leads
Hmm.
would be what I would have done, at least 6 months sooner. That would have saved me a lot of headache, because I put a lot of time and effort into building out what I thought at the time was a good system on platforms that couldn't support growth. Right. So changing that right off the start would have made a big difference.
100% agree with you on that. I literally switched from platform to platform to platform. And keep this in mind that it's no easy thing to do to migrate from one platform to the next platform, to the next platform. And at times, often I question is like, am I going to constantly be doing this? Is it just because I'm not just accepting and settling, or is it worth the ROI of constantly doing this? But in my opinion, it was. And the way that I view it is, it's almost like it's like a vehicle to get to your destination. You could be walking to your destination, and my equivalent of that is using like an Excel spreadsheet or something where you're just storing contact information or using your contacts in your phone, right?
Yeah,
That's the equivalent of walking to your destination. If you use like a very baseline CRM, maybe you set in reminders, follow up, stuff like that, maybe recording, taking some notes, that's the equivalent of like riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
If you could set up a very, very well laid out, automated to some degree, complex, and maybe complex isn't the best term, but very, very, very well laid out path for all your leads, all your contacts, like a proper CRM system. Now it's like you're driving in a vehicle. Now you're driving in a car. Now you can get from one point to the next point way more efficiently. And you can take a lot more contents with you, a lot more luggage with you. So your capacity increases if you have a good CRM. And that's how I review it. And, for people out there trying to find their CRM, if you're not happy with it, maybe look into another one, because it can be worth the hassle of trying to migrate all your contacts over. Now, there's one thing you mentioned, there was like getting started into real estate years ago. And honestly, it's a common theme with every guest that I speak to. And it sort of ties in perfectly with like my favorite segment. And I know we've already gone overtime here, but I kind of have to do this. So it's called time capsule.
Yeah.
Just imagine that you stumbled across a time machine that allows you to travel back and forth in time. Now, Mitch, you can't change anything, unfortunately. So no getting lottery numbers or anything along those lines, but you can give and receive advice from your younger or older self. So, if we were to go back to your 18-year-old self, which wasn't that long ago, what advice would you give your younger self with the knowledge that you have now? Again, this can be business, it could be investing, personal life, familial, it can be a combination of it all. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, definitely just to invest, not necessarily in any particular asset class, but being an 18-year-old guy, growing up with blue collar jobs and stuff, I didn't really invest in anything, my time or money, honestly. I invested some time into my job, but that was about it, right? And learning about how your investment, your efforts today, whether that's money or time, can compound. If I had started doing stuff when I was 18, I'd be in Florida right now, not in the minus 30-degree weather.
Oh, I get it, man. I get it. The weather out there is brutal. Yeah, honestly, it's a common one, and it's common because it's true. It really is. I mean, it's never too late to get started, but the best time was like 20 years ago. The best time is as early as possible, because there's that compounding effect. And again, like you mentioned, this is with regards to everything, with regards to even building up your skill sets. It compounds on top of each other. So getting started earlier, investing in yourself, investing in how you spend your time and how you spend your money, it pays in spades. So for anyone listening out there who's been on the fence, now's your time. That's your sign.
Yeah.
Don't wait another day. Just get started as small as you need to.
Yeah.
Now, Mitch, if we were to fast forward and we look ahead to your 80th birthday, what advice do you imagine your future self would offer you at your present age?
Oh, I know the answer to this one, and it scares me, honestly, but it's definitely to spend more time with my family.
100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's mine as well, because honestly, we have goals, we're driven, right? We have goals, and we just want to spend all of our time, not all of our time, but as much of our time pushing towards that. And it's for a reason, there's a why behind it all. But, when you look at your family, especially you look at like your kids, and time flies by. And you look back at pictures and you look back at videos and you're like, I can't believe that was that was what they look like. Look at them now. You know what I mean? Like, so much has happened, especially when they're younger. The amount of growth that happens is so fast, and the amount of like special moments, it's just, yes, I fully agree with that. And I think that's also a common struggle. It's that common balance of being goal driven, and doing what it takes to be goal driven. Because, let's be real, if you're going to accomplish something extraordinary to some degree, it takes a level of being imbalanced, right? Of like putting in extra time, more than the standard person is willing to put in. And that's what makes that's what gives you the extraordinary outcome and results. But it does come with just a voice at the back of your head that says, hey, you need to be spending more time with your family, because it's something that that you're going to think of. And here's another thing. It's a common one, is when you're early on in your journey, you do value your money more than you value your time. And as you progress over your journey, that flips around way, way more out of proportion, where you like really value your time way more than you value any money, right? You will pay for getting time back. Whereas when you're early on in your journey, you will rather pay with time versus actually forking something out so that you can save the time. And it's because time is that valuable. But unfortunately, I think we all go through that early on in our journey. We just kind of have to sacrifice the time and hope that we can make up enough of it, and then be somewhat balanced so that we can spend time with our loved ones.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. I went off on a tangent there. Now it's time for just our quick rapid fire questions. So honestly, just answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Let's just have fun with it, okay?
All right.
Right. So Mitch, if you gave young Mitch 90 days to secure his first real estate investment, what's one skill you tell him to focus on?
Oh, that's tough to narrow down to just one. Okay. Just finding value, I guess. Finding value. There's a lot of properties, there's a lot of real estate out there, a lot of deals, but you need to find value in the right one, and then move forward with it, and then take action.
I love that. Value over price, value every day. I love that. What separates an investor who's small from one who is able to scale?
Oh, I would say that's, I would say mindset first, but right behind that, the second one is systems.
Oh, I had that. Literally, systems. But you're right, it is mindset first, because you won't get the right systems in place if you don't have the mindset. Love that. That was crisp. Okay. What's something you thought was a sign of success, but later realized is just slowing you down? Anything come to mind?
Well, actually, that ties in with mindset. Just feeling like I'm busy, right? Being busy does not equal success.
100%. 100%. Okay. What's the biggest inefficiency you've eliminated in your business that's allowed you to scale faster?
Oh, definitely manually following up with cold leads, I would say. Yeah. Automating that saved me 4 hours a day easily.
Love it. So there's like an element of AI in that follow-up then?
Kind of AI, but also just putting automated systems in place that manually email and text. Yeah. I don't use AI too much for direct customer communication yet. I just don't feel it's accurate enough with something as unique as rent to own. It can't answer questions properly. But sending them emails that I took the time to write out once, an update every 6 months, and then all of those leads get them, is much, much better.
100%. And that ties into like what we spoke about early on, is there are these one-time activities that you can do that are going to pay dividends, for a long time to come. And those are the activities that you really need to focus on. Like you mentioned, investing your time, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm just going to manually do this. So you can manually be busy every single day, or you can take one day or 1 week to draft up enough follow-up that you can somewhat automate, that now allows you to scale. I love that. I think that's a perfect way to end this off, because I think, in my opinion, from the outside, that's probably one of the things that have allowed you to scale that great, is the system that you've put into place, and doing small things like that, stacking that on top of each other with as many tasks as you can, allows you to save time and allows you to get more out of the limited time that you have. So, Mitch, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your invaluable insights. Now, where's the best place for listeners to find you? I'm sure people don't want to stop this journey there. You put a ton of good content out. Maybe, who knows, maybe we even have some potential rent-to-own clients that want to reach out to you. Maybe we have some potential joint venture money partners, or just people who just want to be in your sphere, be in your network, and just absorb as much as you have to give. Where are the different places everyone can reach you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook. Definitely add me and send me a message. Love connecting with new investors and or tenant buyers on there. I'm on Instagram. Where else? Yeah, I mean, really, everywhere except for TikTok. I just have never got onto that platform.
I've tried it, man. The TikTok guys don't love me either.
Yeah.
I tell everyone what though, especially for the people who are driving, I will leave all Mitch's links and contact info in the show notes below. I want to thank you so much for coming on, and to all listeners, go follow Mitch, see what he's doing in the world of real estate. And you've listened till this point, so let's be real, you've enjoyed this episode. So like, subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. Leave us a review, and as always, keep investing smartly. Thank you for tuning in to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. If you want to learn how you can use infinite banking just like the wealthy do, then you don't want to miss the episode with Darren Mitchell. This is your host, Alwyn Noble, signing off.